She tore up my cornfield to build a parking lot for wine tastings and bridge nights, but forgot one little thing I never told anyone, not even my neighbors. My land is leased to Homeland Security. I was brewing coffee when I heard the grinding metal roar from outside, and for a moment I thought it was just another tractor passing by, but when I looked out the window my stomach dropped. A yellow bulldozer was plowing straight through the middle of my field, snapping cornstalks like twigs, and behind it stood Karen Blanchfield in her pressed khakis, arms folded like a queen surveying her empire. The same Karen who ran the HOA like a dictator, the same Karen who once fined me for having a faded mailbox. Only this time she had gone too far. I rushed outside, boots barely tied, heart pounding in my chest. Karen saw me coming and didn't flinch. She even smiled like I should be thanking her. I shouted over the engine, asking what in God's name she thought she was doing, and she waved a rolled-up permit at me like it was a trophy. She shouted back that the HOA had voted unanimously to repurpose the unused land next to the community for public benefit. I told her she was on my land, not HOA property, and she laughed like it was the punchline to a joke I didn't get. I pointed to the no trespassing signs, but she dismissed them with a smirk, saying they were probably old and unenforceable. Then she turned her back on me and walked toward her Lexus parked on the edge of the road. I stood there as the bulldozer chewed a path through 20 yards of crop, every second of destruction chipping away at my calm. It wasn't just a field to me. It was the place my father had planted with his hands, and the same land I signed into a quiet lease with the government years ago when they needed a remote patch of earth for fiber line access and satellite sync. Nothing flashy, just secure. Hidden in plain sight. The perfect cover. A cornfield was the best camouflage. I had sworn not to speak of it to anyone, and I never did until now. When the machines finally stopped, a third of my field had been flattened. Karen had already driven off to prepare for her grand reopening of the space she believed she now controlled. I walked through the wreckage, slowly, my boots kicking up dust and snapped stalks. I could see the subtle outlines in the dirt where the underground conduits ran. Nothing had been unearthed yet, but they were dangerously close. Too close. I went back inside and made a call. I gave them my clearance code and said 3 words. "They're digging here." The line went quiet for a moment, then the voice on the other end told me someone would arrive within the hour. True to their word, 2 black SUVs pulled in just after lunch. They didn't use sirens. They didn't wear uniforms either, just dark jackets with subtle emblems and eyes that scanned everything like they were downloading it into memory. I stepped out and nodded. They didn't introduce themselves, and I didn't need them to. One of them held a digital tablet and pointed to the exposed section of dirt. I explained what happened and handed over a copy of the permit. Karen waved in my face. He examined it, nodded, and took photos. Another agent scanned the ground with a handheld device that blinked red and green intermittently. They didn't speak much, but their urgency said enough. When I asked if they would confront her right away, one of them said not yet. If she's unaware of what she's touched, she's safer that way for now. But we will investigate. I offered to help in any way, and the older agent gave me a thin smile. Just don't fix anything. Let her keep thinking she owns it. That was the moment I knew they weren't just going to stop the damage. They were going to use her arrogance against her. Later that evening, as I sat on my porch, the wind picked up and carried the bitter smell of gasoline from the flattened field. I watched HOA members trickle into the new gravel lot wearing polo shirts and toting folding chairs for some kind of wine and cheese gathering. Karen strutted across the uneven surface, giving directions like a traffic marshal. She waved at me again like we were old friends, and I waved back with a smile I didn't mean. The party started, and I sat in the dark watching like it was a movie. I thought of the wires and conduits hidden beneath their feet and the unmarked access hatch not 10 yards from their snack table. They had no idea. Not the people sipping Chardonnay. Not the HOA members exchanging gossip. Not even Karen, who clinked her glass with a toast to her own visionary leadership. I didn't need to shout or protest or hang up signs. I just had to wait. and while they partied on my land believing they'd won, the agents were already circling their names and compiling data. They had triggered something far bigger than HOA politics, and none of them even knew it. I went to bed early that night. Slept like a stone. Because tomorrow was going to be even better. The next morning started with the kind of silence that doesn't sit right. No birds, no rustling leaves, just the thick stillness of something brewing. I sat at the kitchen table sipping black coffee, staring out at the wrecked patch of land where cornstalks used to sway like lazy soldiers. The gravel lot Karen had installed looked even worse in daylight, full of uneven dips and tire ruts, a half-hearted slap over a scar. I hadn't touched a thing since the bulldozers left. Just like the agents told me. Let her think she won. Let her dig her own hole. And she was doing it beautifully. I didn't have to wait long. By mid-morning, another SUV pulled in, different plates this time. Out stepped a woman in a navy suit, not Homeland this time but federal for sure. She introduced herself as Agent Harris and didn't waste time on pleasantries. She asked to walk the property. I led her along the edge of the damage, explaining what I knew. She nodded often, took notes, asked sharp questions. Did I see who authorized the construction? Did I know how close they came to the conduit? Did Karen know? I answered honestly. I saw the permits. I saw her in charge. And no, she had no clue what lay under her gravel. If she had, she'd have worn a hard hat and maybe backed off. We stopped near the northwest corner where the access hatch was hidden beneath a dummy irrigation valve. Agent Harris squatted beside it and ran a portable scanner over the ground. The device beeped 3 times, then she stood and locked eyes with me. She asked if I knew what kind of systems were running under my land. I told her I had clearance enough to sign the lease and report breaches but not enough to know the full menu. She nodded again, satisfied, and told me this wasn't just about cables anymore. Karen's parking lot had disrupted a surveillance sync node. That meant real-time intelligence feeds were potentially compromised. In short, she broke more than corn. Before leaving, Agent Harris handed me a number written on a business card without a name. If anyone else touches this land, you call immediately. No questions. No hesitation. She didn't smile, didn't say goodbye. She just got in the SUV and drove off like she was already late for something more dangerous. Later that day, I got a visit from Dave, one of my quieter neighbors. He worked tech for a startup and rarely came out unless there was a community emergency or free food. He looked frustrated, tapping his phone as he approached. He asked if my Wi-Fi had been acting up, which struck me as funny since I used a hard line connection the feds installed years ago. He said the whole neighborhood was having issues. Slow speeds, cameras glitching, even smart doorbells showing blank screens. I shrugged and said maybe someone dug a little too deep where they shouldn't have. He laughed, but I saw the worry behind it. By sundown, whispers had started. A few HOA members stopped by the gravel lot looking uneasy. Someone mentioned dropped cell signals near the site. Another complained about their remote garage door failing. I just watched from my porch and offered no opinion. Let them stew. Karen didn't appear that evening. Maybe she was avoiding questions, or maybe she was planning her next move. Either way, I knew things were starting to turn. The next morning, the turning became a full spin. A Homeland vehicle parked discreetly near the back road. 2 agents got out, one of them from the day before. They didn't knock. They just walked the lot, measuring distances, snapping photos, scanning with handhelds. By now, curious neighbors had started noticing. A small crowd gathered at the end of the street. I overheard one guy ask if someone had buried something illegal. Another whispered about an environmental violation. The theories bounced around faster than truth could catch up, which worked in my favor. By mid-afternoon, Karen returned in her usual storm of perfume, pearls, and poor judgment. She marched up to the lot and demanded to know what the agents were doing. They calmly showed her identification and said they were following up on a possible infrastructure breach. Karen laughed like it was absurd. She pointed to her permits and claimed this was all within HOA jurisdiction. She tried to assert her authority the way she always did, by speaking louder and faster than anyone else. But the agents weren't from the HOA. They didn't care about her newsletters or her little parking lot. One of them said clearly that she had entered restricted property without authorization and could be liable for damages. That silenced her. For a moment, she switched tactics and played the victim. She said I had always been difficult, that I was antisocial and made everyone uncomfortable. She accused me of sabotage, of planting something just to trap her. I just stood there, arms crossed, saying nothing, letting her unravel in front of the neighbors who once voted for her. The agents asked if she had any documentation proving the land was under HOA jurisdiction. She fumbled. Her face flushed. She waved her permits again, but this time they weren't enough. They scanned them, checked dates, found inconsistencies. One permit had been approved after the demolition started. Another had the wrong parcel number entirely. The agents told her they'd be filing a preliminary report with their superiors. Karen demanded to know who to call, who to complain to. They handed her a number and said she could speak to a federal liaison. Then they walked off. Calm, unshaken, professional. Karen stood in the middle of the gravel, phone clutched tight, lips trembling with outrage and confusion. By evening, the HOA group chat exploded. Screenshots started circulating. Videos from cell phones. Karen screaming at the agents. One member asked if the board had actually voted on the parking lot plan. Turns out they hadn't. Karen had sent an email claiming it was approved after a vote that never happened. People were furious. She tried to backpedal, saying it was an emergency decision to alleviate parking issues. But the more she spoke, the deeper she sank. And me, I just sat back and watched the fire spread. The gravel lot was still there, but the damage had already shifted from the soil to her reputation. Every move she made from now on would only dig her in deeper. The agents were still investigating. The neighbors were turning. And Karen was finally learning that some lines you just don't cross. Especially not the ones buried under a cornfield in a town where secrets run deeper than root. The neighborhood that once stood firmly behind Karen began to show cracks like sun-baked clay. It started with silence. Not the respectful kind, but the uneasy kind that follows a scandal everyone's afraid to mention out loud. Where once Karen's every command was met with eager nods and clipboard scribbles, now there was hesitation in every glance and murmurs in every corner. People stopped replying in the HOA group chat. The usual morning dog-walking crew split into smaller clusters, avoiding Karen's house entirely. She noticed. You could tell by the way she stormed around her yard on the phone, pretending not to look at anyone while looking at everyone. I kept to myself, watching it unfold like a slow-motion implosion. I knew better than to gloat. The best revenge was the kind that didn't need words. Let her see it all fall apart piece by piece. Homeland had done their part quietly but thoroughly. And while no arrests had been made yet, the agents made sure to leave breadcrumbs. Neighbors saw the inspections, the scans, the photos being taken. Rumors spread like dandelion fluff. Someone said they saw satellite dishes under the gravel. Another claimed I was in the CIA. One kid even told his parents I had a trapdoor in my barn that led to an underground spy lab. I didn't correct any of it. Sometimes a little mystery does the work for you. The HOA board decided to hold a special emergency meeting at the clubhouse to address what they diplomatically called the recent miscommunications regarding land use. I made a point to show up even though I usually skipped those events. I wore my oldest flannel shirt, boots still caked in cornfield dirt, and sat in the back row where I could see everything. Karen arrived fashionably late in a beige pantsuit and fake confidence. She stood at the front and tried to launch into a speech about her dedication to community vision and infrastructure enhancement. But before she got past her second sentence, Barbara Renner interrupted. Barbara was one of the founding members of the HOA. Quiet, polite, but with the kind of memory that scared people. She held up a printed screenshot of the permit Karen had used and calmly asked why the date didn't match the work timeline. Karen stuttered something about streamlined digital processing.